Hello everyone, Zelleranth here, and today we're going to take a look at a unit that I have mentioned in prior videos when kind of comparing to Auguste, who is currently coming out in the next week, and that is Tristan. She is very similar to Auguste in playstyle to a certain extent. There's a lot of unique things in her kit that makes her stand out, so if you had both units, it's not a negative. But she is a unit that I feel could take the place of Auguste in a lot of your teams, and is a good reason you could skip him if you're kind of low on pulls and you want to make sure you save up enough for getting Homa and Tear. The big difference to her right off the bat, you can see, is she is not a breaker. She is a destroyer. The one positive of a destroyer, though, meaning she has higher stats than other units. But in the faction side of things, she is in part of the Crimson Knight, the new faction we'll be seeing coming out. So she's in the same one that the alternate Sophia's in, alternate Raliwa. She's in Aggression, so just like Auguste there, and then she's also a Union member. So she can get quite a few good leadership buffs from being in 3 different factions. So let's go ahead and take a look at her trait. Alright, when we look at her trait, it is a little bit difficult to read while I'm reading it, so I'll try and explain what it means as best I can here. So first, when we look at the 1-star, which she starts immediately with, is before attacking, if a target has a shield, her damage is increased by 30%, and the shields are dispelled. When she is doing an area of effect, or area damage, if it is physical damage, it is treated as magic damage. So that's one big thing that she has that's kind of unique in her kit, as that she can do a mix of physical and magic damage, as any of her AoE type physical attacks are actually converted into magic damage. And then at the start of the battle, she has this ability that's always available called Blood Rage, where when she does it, she enters what's called a Rampage state, and this is a buff that comes with toughness, immunity to interference, and it does she's immune to percentage penetration damage, and her damage is increased by 25%, but treatment effect is reduced by 80%. All effects cannot be dispelled and cannot be immunized. So it has the positives doing a lot more damage, but then it also reduces her ability to heal herself. Now there is part of the Blood Rage that doesn't mention here, so when we go over and look at what Blood Rage is, the skill, so she sacrifices 90% of her current health to do 50% damage to all enemies within 2 squares of her, and she enters that Rampage state that we just read. And then she can take action again, and then all skill cooldowns are reset to 0, so any of her big cooldowns, they're immediately reset to 0, and all energy is restored, so she goes all the way up to max energy. This can only be used once per battle. This is a big part of her kit, especially going into the lower health. Kind of determines what are actually going to be her best weapons and armor. But with this, she can do a significant amount of damage in one giant burst. I do have... We've seen kind of some of it with some videos that I've shown in the past, which I'll kind of show towards the end of the video. But that is the Rampage state, so that's kind of the core. And then when she is releasing that, she also triggers Unlimited Unyielding. This is that one where when she dies, she comes back to life, which is kind of good since she is taking away 90% of her health. And this lasts until the next round of action. So if she basically, it's kind of like a Lexi, where if she gets attacked and dies, she's just not going to die. She's just going to stay up until the next round. And that lasts... and the Rampage does last for 2 rounds at 1 star. So then as you start going up on her traits, the big thing that you'll see at 2 stars is during which, so when she's in that, her critical hit and critical damage is increased by 10%. When you go to 3 stars, this one increases the Rampage lasts for 3 rounds. So at 4 stars, it's now 20% on the crit hit and crit damage. And then all the way up to 5 stars, it is the Rampage lasts for 4 rounds, it's 20%, and then there's non-instant skills are additionally reduced by 2, so your skill cooldowns are reduced by 2, and the energy consumption is reduced by 1. So this is pretty huge. I mean, one big thing is you're going to want to get her into 5 stars just because she can spam her skills a lot more often because they're reduced by 2 turns per... Yeah, and so if you have a skill that's 2, it's basically, you can do it every turn. And then it lasting 4 rounds makes it where you're going to be able to spam a lot of damage right off the bat. But that is one kind of negative to her, is if it's a more sustained fight where you're needing to continue the output in that damage, you kind of see a weakness in her, because once she uses this ability and it's done, you can only do it one time per match. All right, so we have the Blood Rage skill up here, and so you'll see in this is kind of just like a lot of the other units where it's just like an additional skill on the side that they have that you can use. This one is available immediately upon the start of a fight. So when it gets started here, so you can see down in her skills, she has her normal ones that she has attached, and then you have the Blood Rage skill here, which has got one use. You can only use one turn at a time per battle. And so they're going to show what it looks like here, and it actually looks pretty cool. It's almost like going Super Saiyan when in use. And you'll notice that little pendant she's holding, that is actually going to be her signature trinket, and we'll go into that when we get into her weapons and trinkets. But she doesn't actually have a signature weapon. I actually said that by mistake in my last video. She actually has a signature trinket, and it is actually very, very good. So that's what it is. She goes into that Rampage state, and if you didn't see there, you can see she got knocked down to that 90% health loss there. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at her skills here. So the first one that she starts with immediately, so you just got to make sure to take into account when it says physical damage and it's AoE, that part of her trait converts it to magic damage. So I'm just going to read it as it states here, but just know that fact. So this is a physical damage attack that deals 85% damage to all characters within 2 squares of the target range, and applies 1 random level 2 attribute debuff for 2 turns. So a nice simple AoE attack that can do quite a bit of damage here and there. And it doesn't have an actual cooldown to it, so this is something that you could use every turn. It just has a cost of 2 energy. So let's kind of take a look at that one. So we can kind of see here, it shows the range of the attack, so it's 2 squares out, 2 to 3 squares out, and then it hits all of them within that range. And it's quite simple, and it's nothing really complex, just a nice AoE attack, but it can hit quite a few enemies within a specific area. So this will be quite good in any map where the enemies get quite congested. Now we take a look at her first rank skills here. We have on the left, Furry Pursuit. This is a physical damage single target attack, so single target attacks will do the physical damage. That causes 120% damage. If the target is not defeated with this attack, sacrifice 20% of the current health to pursue them and do an additional 60% damage. So this is basically she's going to take some of her own health to do additional damage to the enemy. So this can be a good finishing move to knock out an enemy, but it's at the cost of her own health. That's kind of a core thing of her kit, is sacrificing health to herself. But she actually gets buffed from it to a certain extent, which we'll see in further skills. So we look at the skill on the right, it's Fight Off Pursuit. It's a physical damage single target attack that deals 70% damage, and then after attacking, it performs chase, dealing an additional 70%, and then knocking the target back 2 squares. Alright, when we look at her rank 3 skills here, the one on the left is Hot-Blooded Step. This is a instant to charge to a location within 1 circle around her, so within the circle of squares around her. It's not 1 grid, so it counts the corners as well. And then she gains a damage +2 when she moves there, and then after use, the skill changes to another one. It changes to the skill Headbutt that lasts for 2 turns. So this is an instance, you can use this. It has no energy cost, so you can use this whenever. It just has a 3-turn cooldown. And then when we actually look at what the skill that it turns into Headbutt here. This only has a 1-turn cooldown, but the big thing is, once you use this, it's going to convert back to the other one, so it effectively has a 3-turn cooldown. But this one's also an instant, it has no energy cost, and you select 1 enemy within a cross range and in charge of that enemy, dealing 70% damage, and knock them back 2 squares, and after attacking, the skill changes back to the original. So you can basically, since there's no energy cost with these are basically a 1-2 combo. You'll use the first one, and then you'll switch and then use this one that knocks them back. The nice thing about this one with regards to knocking enemies back is that you can reposition her based on enemy movements to actually make it where you can much easier to knock enemies off the map. And we'll kind of take a look at how it works here. So you can see it's using the first ability here, the movement one here, so it gives you any of the squares around her she can move to unless it's occupied. And so you can see if she wants to knock back this enemy on the right, which is what they're going to do, she can move to either of these 2 squares on her right and then pursue the knockback with the Headbutt attack here. So we'll go ahead and watch it here. So she just picks the square she wants to go to. She teleports there. She now has the ability from the other skill available down here. And you don't have to use it. That is one thing with it. You do not have to use it. You can just use that to reposition her, use another skill, and then save that headbutt attack for 2 turns later if you want to. You don't have to use that. You can just use it to reposition for something else as well. There's no requirement to go right into it. But if you do want to just go right into it, you can, because they're both instants. So this is like what you see with a lot of other ones. It's just a cross-shaped range, and then you'll just be able to go into them, hit them, and then it knocks them back the 2 tiles. And then boom, and knocked back. And so they work really well together. It's just because it gives you're able to position yourself better to actually do the knockback when you want to. You don't have to kind of set yourself up hoping that the enemy is going to go to the right spot that you want them. You just have to be kind of in that area to reposition yourself. All right, when we look at her rank 3 skill on the right, Burning Blood, this one is a passive. So when in the healthy state, add 15% of the magic attack value to the physical attack value. When in the injured state, add 25% of the magic attack value to the physical attack value. When in the Rampage state, the effect is doubled. So this one is kind of tricky into seeing the complete use to it, because when you use Rampage, you immediately go into the dying state because it takes her 90% down. There has to be a way to really kind of utilize this to an extent to push her into that. But when in the Rampage state, those buffs are quite massive, and she can eventually take on healing to get herself back up. So I could see getting put immediately into the injured state fairly quickly with some heals. And since that effect is doubled, you can effectively do a 50% increase to her magic. So you can do some pretty insane AoE magic attack damage with this passive if she's in the Rampage state. So we go to her reactions. The one on the right, the level 5, is Defense Against Arrows. This is one we've seen on many units. It's when attacked from a distance, so any range damage, the damage is reduced by 25%. We've known this to be pretty valuable on a lot of the bosses that we've used on some of the lower ranked units, just because, I mean, they can do some massive damage to our current units in the current landscape of the game. But when you go over to the one on the left, this is going to definitely be the one you want to choose. It is very hard to read on kind of what it's saying, but basically, we'll kind of click into it to get the more in-depth look at it. So this one's a reaction. So first, it reduces melee damage by 20%. So right off the bat, it's very similar in the ranged one, except for melee, it reduces it by 20%. And then it has this preemptive trigger effect called Fighting Back, and what Fighting Back is when attacked by a single target attack, or a single target, and the attack is within attack range, counterattack with normal attacks or skills to cause damage back to them. It has block built in. So it's kind of hard to read here, but it's basically you can preemptively attack a counterattack, is from what I'm understanding. And then the damage received is reduced by an additional 50%. So you have that 20%, that 50%, so you're basically reducing damage by 70% on the attack. And then here's where you're kind of seeing that part of, so she attacks, and then after being counterattacked by them and reducing that by 70%, she'll do an additional attack that does 70% physical damage, which can be triggered up to 1 time per round. So it's kind of really hard to read, but the way I kind of see it is it's a way for her to counterattack a counterattack. So she attacks, they counterattack, and then she counterattacks back to them. And does quite a significant reduction into melee damage to her, but this can happen 1 time per round. Alright, let's look at the rank 7 skills here. So the first one we have is Burial with 1 Punch. This is a physical damage single target attack that deals 20% damage to the enemy. Then it knocks them back 1 square, which then from where they're currently at, it will deal another 110% fire attribute damage. What that basically means is that it's going to put burning on all the tiles around them, as well as applying Scorch to all enemies within 2 squares of the target. And then, so if not in the Rampage state, then Tristan will teleport back to the nearest friendly unit within 4 squares. And that'll be kind of key, is because it's putting it within 2 grids and you've only knocked him back 1. It's effectively putting fire right on top of you, and so you're going to actually want to back off at that point. But the nice thing with this is you're basically knocking them back and surrounding them with fire, so they're going to be kind of trapped in that area. So unless they have some kind of immunity, they're going to take a lot of dot damage to try and get out of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this skill. Alright, so we're taking a look at this skill. One thing is it's not very clear what's happening in it, so I kind of explain it because it kind of cuts back from after it does the attack, it cuts back and then shows the fire and the teleport. So I'll just kind of explain it as we go through it. So you can see she goes into attack. It's basically kind of like an ultimate because it has a good animation with it. She just jumps up, hits the target. You'll see the damage, but you can't really see the map here at this point yet. Then it's going to jump back. I'm guessing they're explaining it a little bit. And then it's going to go back into the video and show the teleport back. So you can see the map. So she attacked this guy here, knocking him back. As you can see, within 2 grids of him, it put fire on all the tiles. The big reason she has a teleport back to the nearest ally within 4 tiles is, as you can see, she's right there in the fire. And so she's going to take damage. She's not immune to it, so she's not going to take damage unless he moves back. And so you're going to see her teleport back to the nearest friendly unit, put him back behind it. Now let's take a look at the rank 7 skill, point blasting here on the right. This one's an instant debuff that applies pinpoint demolition to the target with a 3-turn cooldown, 2 energy cost. This has a range of 2 to 4. The big thing with this one is it's basically putting like an explosive on the target, so they're marked. And then if any skill by Tristan is done that is not from equipment, the key thing is not equipment, so you can't put this on them and then immediately use an equipment attack like using the fire ring or the arm guards to damage them. It has to come from her own skill. So when on the caster's next turn, when it attacks them, or the target is defeated, there will be an explosion within that target. And that explosion will cause piercing damage of 20% of the target's health, and then all enemies within 2 squares of the target will have vulnerability 2 applied to them for 2 rounds. Alright, so we take a look at this skill in action. It's basically attack where you can put an explosive on that's kind of delayed. They go in the area of all their other teammates, and then you can kind of trigger it into an effect by using a skill on them when the right opportunity arises. So you can kind of see with this. And then when they explode, it's going to put vulnerability 2 on all the enemies. So you're going to see it kind of here real quick. So you can see attacking a target that's marked up here. And then hits them with the skill. Explodes on all of them and puts vulnerability 2 on them. Right here. So they don't have to die, but if they did die, it immediately blows up and puts the vulnerability on them. In this case, it was based on an action from her attacking them. All right, let's take a look at her replacement basic attacks here. The first one on the left, we've seen with a lot of units. This is just a deal 100% physical damage and applies the unable to use passive skills to enemies in the injured status for 2 turns. So kind of that conditional one, they have to be injured to trigger this one. When we look at the one on the right, it's a normal attack that causes 100% physical damage and increases the critical damage by 15%. She has a lot of crit built into her kit, so this one would probably be my preferable one just to have more damage. There's no condition to it. It just increases after attack, increases her critical damage by 15%. When we take a look at her level our rank 11 skills here, we have family on the left. This one is a passive, and this one's kind of a little bit wordy. It'll be a little bit easier to explain when we kind of watch it in practice. So when healthy, so when Tristan's healthy, assistance defense is triggered. It's performed on other friendly troops within 2 squares of self. When dead, other friendly troops within 2 squares of self are assistance defense for self. And then after any effect is triggered, all friendly troops within 3 squares of the self gain attack 2 and damage reduction 2 for 2 rounds. And this can only happen once per round. And so what assistance defense is kind of like if you think of what Mytha and Coco do, where they replace themselves to take the damage for a teammate when they're being attacked. This is one that can work both ways within the team. So Tristan can block damage for a teammate, but the teammates can also block damage for Tristan, and that's going to be very big on her kit, because when she goes into the Rampage mode, she gets knocked down to 90%, she knocks out 90% of her health, so having a teammate to come in and block the damage for her is very useful in that respect. So let's go ahead and take a look at this in practice. Alright, we're going to go ahead and take a look at it. So in the beginning, you're going to see her take the damage for somebody else, then she's going to go into the Rampage state, and then you're going to see someone else take the damage for her, and then it'll show it kind of back and forth with different variations of it. So she just took the place for Panama there, she went to Blood Rage, and now they're going to attack her, and then they're going to swap places again. So it's a either or. This is someone else can defend for her, or she can defend for them. It's just dependent on the state of her health. And so you kind of see, it'll give you some more examples of it here in a second. It works with summons and all other forms of members within your team here. Let me see if I can skip the talking here. Okay, so you can see. Okay, so it's going to show swapping with an assassin, and it can go back and forth. So you can attack it, swap. So quite useful. A good way to kind of have a defense, having all your team members be able to defend each other in that aspect. Let me take a look at her last skill on the right here. It's Destruction Storm. This is a physical damage that deals 50% area damage to all enemies within 4 squares of the caster and applies 2 random level 2 debuffs for 2 rounds. So this one's just a giant AoE that doesn't have a cooldown. It just has 3 energy costs, and it's a quick way to put level 2 attribute debuffs on a large amount of enemies. Nothing too crazy with this one in that respect. And the last part is kind of looking at her best weapon and trinkets. So we're going to actually use a post from Dogato on this one, because it actually has a good description of her signature trinket within it. The first one is, to me, fairly obvious in what her best weapon is. It's going to be the Brutal Axe, because in the Rampage state, she knocks off 90% of her health. She's in the Dying state. She is going to have the lower health in that respect. Then when it comes to her best trinket, it's a very obvious choice on that one. It is her signature, which you can see down here. So on her signature one here, you have the Bloodstone Amulet. It is a trinket that applies, so it increases magic attack by 10% and then magic AoE damage by 20%. So she does an increased, her magic damage is all AoE, so she really only takes benefit of that first portion. So this amulet does have value in other teammates as well, which would include someone like Beryl. But then it has an additional one that kind of really ties it to her the most, is when in the dying state, which she very easily goes into, the effect changes the magic attack increased by 20% and increases magic AoE by 40%. So just an outright 40% increase in magic damage on top of all the other increases to damage from her own Rampage buffs. So she can do a significant amount of damage with this Bloodstone Amulet. And this is what you'll see when people compare her damage output to Auguste's, is with this amulet, it pushes her over him in terms of damage. Without this amulet, she's about equal or slightly less. But yeah, that is kind of, those are the best weapons. When it comes to any of the other weapons, just in general, anything could really work. When it comes to her trinkets, to me, when it comes to the DPS, it's always going to be that Arm Guard or Auguste Scrolls, because that's just always good on pretty much anybody. Or you can have like the Fire Ring that applies Scorch to them. And that is Tristan. An overall great unit. Very similar to Auguste in terms of the factions. But she is a destroyer rather than being a breaker, so that's a little bit of a difference there. But she has similar damage potential, plus more if you get her signature weapon. And she has a lot of, with the burst potential, it is a one-shot in terms of her Rampage, because once she uses it, when it ends, at 5 stars, it's 4 rounds, but once it ends and she exits it, she can't do that burst again, so she kind of loses a lot of that DPS in a longer, more sustained fight versus Auguste, who can handle a sustained fight a little bit better. But overall, a great unit. The one thing being that since they fit in kind of the same teams, because they both want Gloria, they basically both want all the Union officer members. The aggression, if you're going for the auras, like the aggressions are in the same factions. So I would, if I'm free to play, I would either pull for Auguste or Tristan. I wouldn't really want to go for both, because they're going to both want the same teams to really maximize their potential. And it's kind of the same reason of why I said Auguste right now is probably an easier skip of all the good units coming out, just because she can fit a lot of what he's able to do. And that gives you the ability to save now so that you can pull on Homa and Tear when they come out. And then if we look at the CN version, she came out like 4 units after Tear. So depending on if they don't change things up too much, you'll have quite a bit of time after Tear to save up for her. I mean, you'll have to skip alternate Raiwa and Panama to do that, which those are really good units as well. But it is a choice. When you're playing free to play, it's near impossible to get every unit unless you're super lucky. So there is always that. But overall, great unit. Love her kit. I love the dual role of being able to do physical and magic damage, because that means she is able to be used in most content that requires either physical or magic. You just have to shift her kit around to do the damage type that you want. But that's pretty much it. If you like this video, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.